everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Especially thank you to Jeff Q. Um, Jeff and I were talking off screen, and I realized that he and I met through the marketingops.com community. And he is one of those people who not just female founders and technologists, but he is someone who invests so much in the community and helping people be better at their jobs. So in the spirit of community, Jeff, I wanted to give a big shout out to everyone who's considering joining Mopsapalooza and has not registered yet. There is still time. It's in November. Go to marketingops.com. You can meet Jeff and I in person, which is less impressive than it probably doesn't sound.
So
impressive.
unfortunately, I'm only going to be in virtual attendance.
Oh, okay.
I'm not. I actually did in the mock Slack channel. I made a comment yesterday, and Sydney over at ME Collective had commented, I basically said, well, I got to replace the furnace, and we may hear the furnace come on because my office is next to the furnace, but I have to replace it or go on a trip, right? And I'm like, I got to do the furnace before winter comes.
You have to, for sure. Yeah.
So.
Well, okay, then it's 100% less impressive because then you'll just get to meet me in person, and there's nothing very exciting about that.
Well, you know what? I am so looking forward to being able to meet all these people I've been chatting with for years, whether it's Daryl or Jess or Justin or Paul, right? And I don't even have to put last names on these people because these are the celebrities in the industry, right? And everybody knows who I'm talking about. And Mike is a hard one because, there's two Mike Rizzos out there and there's a Mike Hartman. So it's kind of hard when I say Mike, it's like, which one is it? Kind of thing.
I only call him Rizzo.
It's all of them, right? Like even the two both Mike Rizzo. There's your Mike Rizzo, our Mike Rizzo, and then there's another Mark Rizzo in marketing operations as well. There's just so many amazing.
And the baseball player. So I mean,
really? Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Or it's a hockey player. I've Googled it once or twice and found it.
Okay.
Well, cool. So we are not here today to pitch community, although I would encourage everyone to get involved because it makes us all better. We are here to talk about building a center of excellence, and explicitly about when you're starting a new role, how do you think about coming into this new role and making an impact and being successful? And we've put together some materials that we've accumulated from a bunch of different people starting new roles. It's actually a sample deck, so it'll help people kind of start not with a blank page, and you don't even have to use Chat GPT. And when I shared it with Jeff said, you know what? I've been keeping a list of best practices and things that I might do again and I might do differently. So in that vein, we asked the incredible Jeff Q to join us to share things, learnings from his most recent transition to leading, marketing operations at one of the biggest brands in our marketing community. I feel like Uberflip is just a powerhouse brand in our marketing technology world. And so what he's done to start off with a bang, and what he would do differently if he were to do it over again. Does that sound right?
Yeah, thank you. So actually, even though you didn't want to promote community, I really want to promote it because it's actually really essential. Excuse me. It's essential to the topic, right? Building your center of excellence. What do how do you set up your 30, 60, 90, and actually 180-day plan? And I'm going to talk about that as well. But questions to ask before you even go looking for a new role as well, like what kind of environment you want to get into. And in a moment, I'll actually just make a few comments on specific things you want to be thinking about. And these are questions I asked as I started to look for a new role as well. And but the community part is so under leveraged, right? I know LinkedIn groups hasn't been successful at all. But Slack groups has really been successful. I think like when I go into Slack, I have it's either 9 or 11 different groups I'm in. yeah, 11 different groups, and they're all marketing ops related. From, there's marketing op, the mopros.slack.com. There's another mops professionals. There's the Rev Genius. There's the operational analytics. There's Workflow Pro. There's Wizard of Ops, OpsStars, Growth Ops Community. There's so many. Now, if you specifically in marketing ops, whether it be HubSpot, Marketo, you definitely want to get into the mopros.slack.com, which is marketingops.com. And this is where you're going to network. I think given this sort of burn that's happened within the tech community over the last 2 years, and just in the last year alone, I think it's been 250,000 roles have been eliminated. And now there's so many, you don't even hear about that anymore. You just start to, on LinkedIn, you just start to see lists of companies that have had recent rifts, right? So being involved in communities is where you're going to find your next role. You're not going to find it on a LinkedIn job posting. You're going to find it because in a Slack channel, in a group where you're active in it, and someone has said, hey, I'm looking for someone for this role, because that's where the roles are being posted, right? And people know you and know if you're helpful, or if you're either a lurker. And lurker is, I don't know if that's still a used word, right? Where you're, it's the 80-20.
Lurker's way better than troll, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, troll is when you just make useless comments, right? And the lurker is someone who doesn't do anything. And it's generally the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of your attendee or participants are active 80% of the time. 80% of your attendees are active 20% of the time. Most of them are lurkers. It's just, I almost think it's just a human condition, right? If you think about your study groups in school and all that, 20% of the people do most of the work. You, in some companies, in some larger companies, that may exist. In smaller companies, that's not really valid, because everybody wears so many hats. Everybody has to be on the go all the time and has a lot of responsibilities, right? But some other questions you want to start thinking about as you start to look for a new role and determine if you're a fit is, it's almost personality. Like, one of the first questions I had asked was Mac or PC, right?
Yeah.
Right. And it really defines, like, just depends on who you are. I'm not going to say which one is better, because I don't think either one is better. I think it fits a certain mindset, right? Depends where you sort of exist on that personality spectrum, right? Google Workspace or Office 365. There are certain things you can do in workplaces. The name's changing. I type Google Workspace, I put in, but I'm like, is it actually Workspace or is it Workplace? I just don't remember anymore. I have to look. I'm actually used to calling it Google Docs, right? Because I've been using it for so long. Or Office 365, different functionality. What is your project management tool?
Do you have a project management tool?
Yeah, that's even a better question. Do you have one, right? Like Jira, I've got Jira, Rike, Asana, Trello, just a spreadsheet. They're all good. It's if you think about what Jira, Rike, Asana, Trello, all these apps are, is they're all just sort of pretty interfaces on top of the spreadsheet, right? I think that's the concept behind Airtable. I haven't used it, but I know some people do use it. A former colleague from SAP was there for a while. And another important question too is, and this, I guess speaks to culture, perhaps even speaks to power management. How does communication occur? Is it done through Slack channels? Is it done through email? Is it done, through iMessage? Are you scheduling your Zoom calls, or are you having impromptu huddles in Slack? And I think that speaks to if your company works in a synchronous mode or an asynchronous mode, right?
Yeah.
And synchronous is like, no, we expect you to be at your desk 9 to 5, even though maybe you're remote. And that's another, of course, I didn't even say that right at the beginning, remote, hybrid kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've been remote for years. Even before remote was a thing, I've been remote. I remember as a kid, a friend of mine, I was in elementary school, and this friend, his dad worked from home as an architect. And I'm like, you can work from home? kind of thing. Like I didn't know that was a thing. And this is my, so for me, working from home was like a totally normal thing because that was like my mom went to an office, a school, she
Yeah.
worked at school, and then this fellow, his, another friend and another friend who's a neighbor, the dad was a writer, still a popular Canadian writer, and still writing today into his 90s, and work
That's
from
so
home,
cool.
right?
Is he a popular writer or Canadian writer?
Canadian, well, Canadian writer. I think he writes about historical stories. Really, but I don't. Yeah, that's all I can. That's kind of thing. But then leadership styles, I think, is really an important question you want to ask. And so I use the expression, is this a human focused company? So which means, do you encourage failing fast, or is it zero failure tolerance? And I've experienced both, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know, right? There's this expression, you lead from the front, or you do boss from behind, right? That's part of what is the leadership style.
Yeah.
Do you have weekly one-on-ones with your leader, or do you end up in this, are they the type of person like, well, I don't have anything to say, talk about this week, so we're not going to talk? Like, well, that's not really a leader, that's more of a boss style thing, right? A leader is someone who's going to want to make sure that you're up to date on your assignments, you have everything you need to complete your assignments, you're always thinking about what you can do to improve things, as opposed to just waiting to be told what to do, right? How can your role contribute to the growth of the company? Do you do daily morning meetups as a team, right? As opposed to,
Yeah. There's so many people who hate meetings and hate collaborating like that, just want to have their to-do list done. And some of them want to be really collaborative and talk with other people. And
yeah,
it's certainly a preference.
and that is really important to understand before you start somewhere. um, Understanding that about yourself, what is it you're looking for? And I think this all sort of speaks to asynchronous or synchronous work style,
Yeah.
right? So these are the things, for me, these are the things you want to, and there's many more questions you can think of to ask, but these are sort of primary. They speak to culture, right? And how are the systems used?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
the I don't know if you want to sort of jump into sort of what are some of the things you think about. I know right now there's a lot of posts online from people in MOPS about what they want to do in 30, 60, 90 days. And what I'm finding out there is, what I'm seeing posted is very granular, right? And so I kind of want to speak to more high level.
Yeah. 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 Well, and I think I especially want to hear from you on what you've learned, right? Like, what would you do different? Like, especially, I'm all about the fails. And by the way, we've had a fail with this webinar. It looks like Zoom has pushed an update. And so the confirmation that Zoom has sent out to webinar registrants didn't work. So people are trickling in right now. And we will make recordings available. And while we were talking, I, of course, pushed out a quick Marketo update directly with the correct details.
Awesome.
So apologies to anyone who has been fighting to get in. We appreciate you. And it just goes to show, like, even a company that double checks and has monitors, things can still go wrong. So, okay, so fails. What have you learned? What did you do wrong?
So I've done many fails, and I'm not going to get into doing the moops thing. I actually talk about my only moops that I've been shy to talk about, my big moops. I actually share it with the ME Collective, because I'm on a couple other podcasts that were recorded this past month. They'll be out soon, but that's where my fail fast, or what I call it, the fail fast or zero failure tolerance question comes from, because I've learned that, okay, if you make a mistake, different leaders in a company, some may think, oh, that's okay. So for example, if you send out a MOOPS email with a mistake, right? Somebody new in senior leadership may freak out over it because they're new to the role. They don't want to leave a bad impression with customers that we've sent out this email, and yet you have an opportunity as a marketer to send out a second email saying that we had a moops, and you have a legitimate reason to send a second email on that same day to correct yourself, it's another opportunity to communicate with your prospects or customers, right?
Mhm.
But are you, that's a marketing perspective. If you're head of sales, you may be embarrassed, right? It just
Yeah.
depends on what your perspective is, what your mindset is. That in itself was a huge learning lesson for me, right? Was understanding that difference, because when I explained it from a marketing perspective and the opportunity, it wasn't seen that way,
Yeah. Well,
right?
and for me, is this a mistake we've made 500 times that we can't seem to learn from our mistakes? Or is this a mistake that was an edge case, it was unforeseeable, Zoom pushed an update this week, something's broken with their confirmation link, like it's unforeseeable, right? Like we will test it better in the future, we will make sure it works, and it won't happen again with this webinar platform? Or is it, wow, this has happened every single time we do a webinar, no one seems to be able to learn a lesson, we seem doomed to let history repeat itself? So for me, the two kinds of failures or fails or moops or whatever they are very different, right? Like, and how you tolerate them are very different.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You want to, for myself, they're learning moments, and they reveal errors in process. And sometimes you just don't know. You don't know. We're human. It's humans operating stuff built by humans,
Turns
right?
out, oh, my favorite, one of our original people on the leadership team, her whole thing, she thought our tagline should have been like, oh, um, did people set up your Marketo instance? Uh-oh, people make mistakes. Like, of course something's going to go wrong. Like, it's nothing's foolproof. People make mistakes. It just is human nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And in my it, I was funny. I wanted to come back to talking about Stack Moxie, right? Uh, because I have it kind of in my a point of where it's useful in build it in a 30, 60, 90-day plan, right?
Okay.
So I don't want to sound like a commercial or anything like that for you. And I know, and that's not what the purpose is here. This is an informative sharing information webinar, sharing with our peers in the industry. But every time I've used this analogy before, and I even think I wrote a Marketo LinkedIn post about it, that when you buy Marketo, you have to think about it like a house or a car, right? Like if you go get a mortgage, the bank demands you have mortgage insurance to protect themselves, kind of thing, right? To me, it's a no-brainer. If you get Marketo, you absolutely have to get Stack Moxie. The two of them should come together, right? Because it's insurance, right? And I'm not even talking about the full commercial version. I don't know if you want to hear me say this, but I think everybody should just sign up for the free version, right? Because at a minimum, you can run weekly checks with the free version. I guess you get 25 tests every month, right? You can have it check if your Munchkin code is actually running on Monday to Friday. One of the first wins I had when I got to Uberflip was I did just that. Like day one was setting up Stack Moxie, right? And I was able to identify in the first few days that we had some issues with our Munchkin codes, Marketo Munchkin codes loading, and it was a combination of what OneTrust was doing and what WP Engine was doing,
Mhm.
right? And
Super common.
we ran through a bunch of testing. Adam, I think at the time, got involved as well. Uh, he had your four engineers look into it as well. I was so appreciative of that. Obviously, I'm on a pro account, so that helps. But when I first started, I spun up the free account for Uberflip, but it revealed right away, like in that first few days, like we had an issue that nobody had noticed. And
Yeah,
so,
and there's a lot of web dev tools where the developers think things are working And it's just because we're all in silos because we have to be. Like it's the way the world has worked so far, was that the web team did their thing and it might be part of engineering, and the marketing ops team did our thing, and then there's supposed to be this discrete handoff with sales ops, and they're in their silos, and they have to be because we couldn't interact. But now I think getting into that 30, 60, 90, it's a chance to kind of create a new world where you are able to like have a log that you can share with your web team, and your privacy and compliance team and your attorneys, to make sure stuff is working right, and that you can come together around um, something. And I think that's what great leaders do, is they use these kind of onboarding moments and the things they're discovering as ways to galvanize interconnectivity and teamwork.
Yeah, excellent. Within my 30 days, I actually have, sorry, I'm just looking at my notes here. Kind of got distracted. I can hear someone in the house moving around, the garage door opening kind of thing. Let me close my office door. I'll be right
Okay.
back.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. While he's closing his office door, I hit the wrong button. Apologies. I'm going to launch a poll for the audience. And we will come back to it. Jeff, you keep going, and then I will tell you what poll I've launched. So just ignore it. You don't get to see it yet.
I think one of the first things that I wanted to do, one role I did, was actually I started at a previous company, and I had an opportunity. I need to go meet a team over in Amsterdam, right? And when I got there, the folks there, it seemed to me like they weren't that up to speed on what I was supposed to, who I was, what I was doing. They already had an agency leveraging something. And so what I had to quickly do was identify who was the executive sponsor there. I knew who the executive sponsor was within the organization, but I didn't actually know who the sort of next sponsor was, right? And if you think about what an executive sponsor is, that is the person who has the authority. It's the person with the decision and budget authority for the organization, right? And so within your first 30 days, some of the things, like I see people posting stuff very granular, oh, within your first 30, 60, 90, you need to start building out a bunch of campaign processes, right? But realistically, that's not what you do. What it depends. If you're an individual contributor in that role, you may have to start doing that right away, as well as consecutively, or not consecutively, concurrently, be identifying who's in charge. Who are your stakeholders? If you're in a large organization, with hundreds of users within Marketo, you're going to have an onboarding process of learning about the company first, but then you have to start making the efforts of identifying who are the stakeholders in the company, who are your stakeholders, who are the managers of the users, right? Because you may have people who have occasional access into Marketo to go and fix something, and you're paying for potentially another 100, 200 licenses for people who go in once a year. Maybe you don't need that. You see the same thing with Salesforce, right? When your Salesforce renewal comes up, that it's like, oh, look at that. We are only using 70% of the licenses we're paying for. Well,
Yeah.
you need to get that cleaned up right away, right?
Yeah. All right. So the right away question, we're going to play a game, and that's the audience has already completed this poll, Jeff. So I'm going to ask you the poll question.
Okay.
We're going to play a game called, instead of would you rather, the game is what would you rather do first in your 30, 60, 90, or what did you do first, or what should you do first, I guess is the best way to say it. So I'm ending the poll so no one can be influenced by Jeff's answer. What would you rather do first? Create a new campaign queue for all of your stakeholders that need to get campaigns out the door? Or would you create a campaign QA checklist for them to self-service?
Wow, that's a tough one.
I tried to give you chicken or egg ones that are really mean.
Yeah, it depends. How long is the piece of string? It depends on it depends on the organization you're in, the size of the organization. If currently it is a self-service organization, then the first thing you'd want to do is go through build a QA checklist just to improve quality right away, right? Uh,
Uh-huh.
and then because quality is number one, it's this is what you're sending out to prospects and customers. It's got the information has to be right. um, it's not the first thing I would do, but of the choice of the two,
Yeah, it's which would you do first? Yeah, none of
I
these
would
are the first things I would ever. Actually, I don't know. I might have put an option in here that would be the first thing I do.
so the
Actually,
first
I suck up to the person with budget. That's the first thing I always do, though,
That,
to be
exactly.
honest.
That's what I actually have in my notes here is like, if you've already reached a position to build a center of excellence, then you already know who you need. You already know you need to identify who your executive sponsors are, the people with the money and the authority. That's your
Mhm.
first thing. And you really need to align with them, right? And I'll get into it, but what I think is important around what's the first thing, the most important thing you need to do, and it's not actually has nothing to do with campaigns, but everything to do with the end result, right? And I don't know if we want to sort of hop
Okay,
into
well, what's the end result? And would you do it the same way you did it, or would you do it differently?
you if you're spinning up a new instance at a new company, then you know well, usually you're not building a center of excellence at a new company. You're brought in to build a center of excellence at an existing company. When I was brought in to do this for a previous role, the reason they were doing it was the company had gone out to I can't remember the consultancy now, the Boston Group, right? It was called the Boston Group, and they
Yeah,
had this.
big fancy
Right.
consulting.
Yeah. So they had this huge document, 150 or 200 pages. And one of them was you need to build a marketing operations center of excellence. And you do that by starting by hiring a director of marketing operations. I was fortunate. I was hired. I was successful in getting that role. I proceeded to out, build out a plan for this. Um, and one of those things was going and meeting a team that was already working on the project of their own, but they realized it really wasn't going well and it needed to be part of a bigger center of excellence, right? But then COVID hit. A few months, I started in October. In November, I was in Amsterdam. And then a few months later, I was back there like a week before I'm, through the Schiphol airport. And then I saw people walking around in hazard suits, hazmat suits, like
Yeah,
personal
yeah.
hazmat suits. And I thought, oh, that's so ridiculous, right? And then a week later, everything was shut down across the world. Um, but I proceeded to build a global Martech stack, right? And build a team that was across many countries. But I did it because I hired good people. I didn't do it myself. You
Yeah.
bring on good people to help you do it, right? Um,
Well, and how great to have a company like Boston Consulting Group that has a lot of authority suggest this. So like if you come in as a junior person who's working your way up, or someone who's new to the organization and doesn't have that authority and credibility yet, coming in and suggesting it, it can feel like a power grab. But when BCG says you need a marketing ops center of excellence and let's find someone great, like it's almost like a mantle of authority helps with that onboarding, and really is something you can leverage in any role. So congrats to you on that one. I think I've always had to like scrap my way in.
but it's still not easy, right? And
Oh no.
in terms of how I sort of see an organization, um, the you come in and you still have a lot of resistance, even though you have a consulting group with authority saying this is what you need to do. You still have a process of change management, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you bring in a formal change manager or you bring in someone who has enough EQ And at the time, like I'm actually taking a change management program right now because I felt that my EQ level at that time wasn't high enough and I needed a framework. So I'm actually literally learning a framework right now. One of my, I've realized that,
I feel like that's a webinar for another day, Jeff.
yes, yeah, let's get in. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Right. But sort of the way I see marketing operations, a center of excellence, is you quite often, if you think about how people build out systems, we start with building out, let's go get, what do we need? We need an email platform. Let's go get HubSpot. Let's go get Marketo. Let's go get Eloqua kind of thing. Or whatever, Blaze or something like that, whatever's the flavor of the day kind of thing, right? And then people start to run campaigns, and then at the end of their campaigns, they start to report on those campaigns and show leadership the results. And leadership says, yeah, this doesn't tell me anything. This means nothing to me, right? And so we've been doing this backwards for years, right? And I really come from a place of work back schedules, right? You have to start with the end result in mind. You basically think about what is your in campaign or in change management, you have a current state and a future state. And so in your future state, you think about what does this need to look like, right? And so I think what we have to do as operations professionals is we need to identify what are our successes first, right? We need to be able to say, um, you know, what is the story we want to tell to senior leadership so they are seeing the numbers that make sense to them? At the very high level, the only thing they want to look at is return on investment. You spent
Yeah.
X and you got that. Now, if that isn't working out, if what you got isn't a multiple, of what you spent, then they're going to start asking questions, right? And you need to know how to answer those questions. And before you go building out a campaign, you need to know what the metrics and the successes are, because that determines how you structure your campaigns. Do you build out separate campaigns for your LinkedIn paid display? Do you build out separate Marketo programs, for example, to track your paid search for Bing or paid search for Google, your paid social campaigns on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook? Do you build out all separate programs, Marketo programs, or you just build one program that then has a bunch of smart lists that look at UTM values or look at referrer URL, and then you try and build a report based on that? But that depends. What determines that is where you do your reporting and how granular your reporting needs to be. Now, before you can even determine your campaign structure, oh, we're going to do this in Marketo, you have to think about your platform. Well, what platform do we need? Well, if we have to do that level of reporting, does this platform support it, right?
Yeah.
If you're a B2C company and you want emails rendered as they go out and they're completely individualized, you're going to look at exact target, Salesforce
Marketing Cloud.
right? Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right?
Or iterable or cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay, wait, hold on, Jeff. I'm going to take us to another poll real quick because it's totally related. All right, to the audience, don't look, Jeff, and we'll ask you later because it's just exactly what you just said. Okay, so keep going.
so
Audience, answer the poll.
So essentially what I generally refer to is I want to know what my successes are. I want to know how much growth. I want to know, what does the C-suite want to see, right? This is literally your first few days and your first 30 days. You are determining what does senior leadership need to see? What I said this a few minutes ago. What is the story you're trying to tell? What is going to make them happy? Because they're going to go back to the board and show this as well. What is it? What will get you continually funded, right? And I'm not talking about BSing either, BSing senior leadership board. I'm talking about what are the real numbers to identify business growth? What are the real numbers to identify failed campaign efforts, right? And when you know what those metrics are, what is the story you're going to tell, that actually helps you determine the granularity. of your needed data, right?
Yeah.
So then that determines your campaigns. Are you gonna build out a Marketo? Are you gonna build out a structure where you need to have scalable programs, for example? So then you're going to need to have templates, Marketo program templates, right? Because you have to be able to scale these out fast. Do you need to leverage tokenization within your Marketo programs? Do you have so many marketers out there sending so many emails that it's actually, you could build out a tokenized email program that they never have to open? That's what with Alan and Eddie, who I hired when I was at Magnitude, that's what we built out, was this
Yeah.
automation structure where marketers never had to open an email. They just used tokens and the email was built and they could send themselves a sample.
Yeah. And I was just talking last night about the inception of the Center of Excellence at Microsoft. So like Kristen Lee, Gary Kamikawa, Neil Harrington, like the incredible FTEs at Microsoft I got to work with. But the inception of the program was Satya Nadella standing on stage saying, we are going to make Microsoft Office, at the time it was called BPAWS, but it eventually became Office 365, available to everyone. And when you have questions about it, a sales rep's going to call you back in 2 minutes from hitting our website. And so we created a center of excellence that worked back from that goal. We wanted, with the volume of Microsoft Office, to be able to have salespeople around the world being responsive within 2 minutes. And you work backwards. And so like the very first step was, okay, how long does it take today?
Yeah.
And the routing system, it took us like 2 days and 26 minutes was the average routing time for it to make it from someone filling out a form on the website to hitting the queue and dynamics of the salesperson. And so then you have a work back plan, right? That's our gap. We have to get it from 2 days down to 2 minutes. And then you start to analyze where the problems, and you work back and you get there eventually. So I totally agree. Like what's the business reason? We're going to sell more by being responsive to customers. It's 2 minutes. And now let's work back to make it happen.
There we go. Yeah, it's essentially, it's a gap analysis. That's the first thing you're doing it. But you need, before you can have that gap analysis, you have to know what your future state is going to be, right? Some companies they'll use the phrase to be, or as is, or to be, or current state, future state. It doesn't matter what
Crawl, walk, run is the other one I would say. All right. So coming back to the poll, thank you for completing the questions. And again, we're really tight on this. So would you rather do first, Jeff Q, have a dashboard with your analytics that you're measuring yourself against, or set your fallbacks and failure notifications? I tried not to make them easy.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're both really valid, but I just feel like, I would definitely, it's one of those things I would check my first day, is when I go through actually, I probably wouldn't get access to Marketo until like the third day. And I think in every job I've had, it took a few days over the last decade. It's been a few days before I got into the system, right? It's like, I need to know, where's my laptop kind of thing. You go work in an enterprise company, it could take 3 days just before you get a laptop issued to you, right? So
yeah, I always plan on like painting a room in that first week.
oh, because you're home, working from home.
No. Yeah, you're
No.
working from home. Nothing's happening anyways. Like I'm going to be like, yeah, I'm here whenever you need me. And you've just got your computer up and then you're doing other things because nothing's going to happen.
I don't have an email address yet. I have a laptop but no email address. And that's okay. It's just part of the process. And there's reasons behind that. And it's security reasons, right? So I don't bash enterprise. Having worked in enterprise, I'm at the time it was, I should have probably worked in a smaller company, but they have their pros and cons, right? And like in enterprise, you have access to amazing resources in terms of systems. And if you like to play with systems, it's a great place to be, right? And if you want to be able to solve problems really, really quickly and be responsive, then you want to go work in a small company, right? Pros and cons to anything in life: Mac or PC, Office 365, Google Docs, pick one of them. They're both good.
I picked both.
Yeah. for there, I had built a project. It was kind of like a Visible, homegrown Visible instance of Visible, and I actually talk about it with Ian Michaels on his podcast, because he has something called Attribution Guy. He has a podcast YouTube thing called Attribution Guy, and do you know Ian at all? Have you ever met
No,
Ian?
no, no.
No, he worked on the. He's from Adobe. Worked on the did Visible implementations and that. Really smart guy.
Ooh.
So definitely worth talking to, kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm totally gonna follow him on LinkedIn. I'm excited.
But yeah, before I had even ever been exposed to Visible, I had been introduced to Supermetrics from a colleague, Eric McKinnon, and who I'd met at SAP. And from that, I was able to build out this connection from Google Sheets to Supermetrics, pulling in and then connecting Zapier to pull in Marketo data, and essentially creating this flat file Visible instance that fed into a essentially a Google slide, which I could just hit update on every week and then push that out by email to stakeholders.
I think that's awesome. Oh, okay. So wait, what was it? So it was analytics or it was fallbacks and error reporting?
Day one, you know what? I'm going to say day one, it would be just checking that fallback, right? Like
Yeah,
making
that
sure
one's such an
that's
easy setup.
yeah.
It's when I think about product prioritization, one of the things I always consider is how long is it going to take and how many people are involved. Like that's one you can do by yourself and no one has to have an opinion on it.
But it's that day one you're accessing the system and you're going to go, and I'm in Marketo, like I know the Marketo admin center. I'm going to be sad when they update the interface and make it Adobify it, but because it's one of those spaces in Marketo that still hasn't been Adobified. It still has the icons from 2008. But I know where to look and go through everything and see, okay, where's everything going? All right, this should be going to our home page, or this should be going to this page here, right? So.
Yeah. All right. So I did light up one more poll for everyone. And ask, this one's totally self-serving because these are things that we help with both. Sorry, I'm not very subtle, but it's the last poll is, would you rather audit your website, the forms on your website first, or would you like audit, and if you don't have it, set up a quick UTM builder for your demand gen teams?
Are you waiting for people to vote, or are you asking me to answer
Well,
that?
I was going to go ahead and ask you because we're almost out of time. So
Oh my gosh, we haven't even gotten into the stuff I wanted to talk about. Within So a UTM builder is really important. Auditing all your website forms are really important. You could build these manually. If I was doing it again today as as a stacked Moxie customer, right? I would just go use your UTM builder tool. You released this new feature, I think in the last quarter, which I've already used, which was being able to identify all our forms across our site. Marketo forms specifically, and we're going through this audit right now to reduce hundreds of pages down to tens of pages, as every company should be doing every quarter. And that feature was so useful, right? It was like in the past, I remember having to do it over a couple of years ago at the previous place I worked at, and it took a while. It really took a while till I find all those Marketo forms, and then it was a huge time saver. So again, I don't want to sound like an infomercial or anything, but hey, go get the free version, right?
No, I mean 100%. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I ever wound up auditing all of our website forms for some companies I worked for because they were everywhere. I would have never gotten a new campaign out the door because there were thousands of them everywhere over the website. And so it was one of those things where you make a very rational and practical decision to not do those things because it's just so much time that it can't be the most valuable thing that you're doing.
Right.
Yeah,
And
no,
I didn't actually answer the question anyway. I would actually I would check UTM quality because attribution is so important to me. I would actually go and do the UTM builder first, and then
yeah,
I would check the forms and make sure that all those hidden fields are able to capture all those UTM
Oh,
values.
yeah, yeah. You wouldn't go, okay, all right, I'm here for it. Because you'd go through all of the forms and then you'd want to make sure that the hidden value is what you expect it to be if you use the UTMs. And if you
Yeah.
don't know what the value should be, then you can't even audit
Can't
the
even
form.
evaluate, you can't evaluate your
Yeah,
form
yeah, yeah.
without,
All right.
without knowing if you've actually mapped the hidden fields correctly,
Yeah. All right. I'm
right?
here for it. I thought
So,
I was giving you a hard one. You totally made that one seem easy.
it's not like I don't think this is just experience, as you know, right? You've been doing this. I think all of us, like when I gave the example of sort of the
I'm
celebrity.
29. I don't know what you're talking about, Jeff.
Yeah, my mom would always say that to me. Mom, how old are you? Oh, I'm 23. But then when I was 23, oh, I'm 24. I'm like, and she could get away with it because I'm adopted, right? So yes, it was
Are
funny.
you saying I don't get away
Oh, you don't look 29. You don't look 29.
with Good answer. Good answer.
I know we're our time is short, but one of the things I really wanted to put into people's heads, and this is one of the headlines on for this webinar, was sort of the three pillars of operations, and
Yeah.
you know you can call it tenets, you could call it principles, guidelines, but what I've come up with, and I can't say this is really original. I'm pretty sure I was listening to a podcast 5 or 6 years ago or something like that and heard this concept on a podcast somewhere, right? Possibly from someone doing like real, I was going to say real operations, but like warehouse man operations, like of
Yeah.
how to build out physical processes. We're doing process improvement, but we do it at an abstract level. It doesn't really exist. We're just working with protons. I don't know. I didn't do well in physics.
Software is eating the world. We'll take it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, the three things you need to keep in mind are adoption, governance, and optimization. And this is
Okay.
AGO. A long time ago, right? Adoption, governance, optimization. And actually, let me share my screen on this one here. Why don't I do that? And then I think it'll help people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing.
They can grab a screen capture of this right here. Let me go into sort of slideshow mode here. And let's talk about this, right? So you want to have, and this actually, when I wrote this, I realized now that I'm taking change management studies, this is part of that, right? So you need to have adoption across the organization. And so you need senior leadership adoption of your business language. And so this is one of the big things that doesn't happen until later, when everyone's arguing over, well, what is an MQL? What is an SAL? Is it sales accepted or is it sales assigned? Right?
Yeah.
So you build out a dictionary. Your data science team will often have a data dictionary, but nobody else is using it. You have people who work in customer success who have their own system. You have people who work in support, they have their own system. And you have people in marketing have their own system, and sales, they have their own system. Now, you need to identify, before you can have any sort of syncing or across your organization or alignment across your organization, you all have to say the same words. You all have to know what those words mean. So your data science team will have that data dictionary as a starting point, but you need to make sure that all these different internal business units, and whether they're individual people or teams of people, you all have to speak the same language, and your senior leadership has to adopt that language,
Yeah.
right?
I always call it a common vernacular, right?
Yes. Yeah. A common language, common vernacular. Vernacular is a tough word for me, but so it is business. It is using the same terminology. Everybody agrees that this word means the same thing, but it doesn't stop there. It also means your data model has to match with that, right? So if you have a platform, you have to think about, well, how does finance bill our customers? What is the account name that's in our platform for that customer? What is the account name in Salesforce for our CRM for that platform? And does it align with our intent platform where we're, for our ABM campaigns, ABM efforts, right? Or if you're in your platform, and like Uberflip, for example, has amazing built-in ABM tools, where you can identify and send a page that is just specific one to one, one to many, etc. Right? But you as a company internally, you have to all be speaking the same language. And if you have parent companies as well, that is a whole other layer of complexity, because are you billing to the parent company, right? And then the individual subsidiaries are actually the customers, and they each have their own instance on your platform. Definitely, when I worked at large enterprise, there were multiple business units owning their own instances of Marketo, but who actually paid the bill, right?
Yeah.
Kind of thing, that parent company. So in the CRM, how does that exist, right? And if it's not done well, you could be a Marketo customer. You actually still could happen, because I think Adobe's running like 8 CRMs or something like that. I think that was one of the things Paul Wilson was trying to solve for. But I don't know where that ended up. But you could be getting marketing from Marketo to like buy Marketo, and I'm already a Marketo admin and I've been using it for 10 years. What's wrong with them? Kind of thing, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels bad. It feels like someplace where think you're important and a valued customer doesn't know you.
yeah, I don't, you know what? I never felt that way, only because I understand CRMs and how convoluted and complex they are. So I never took it personally, but I think if I was a new customer not working in marketing ops, perhaps I was, in
It
another industry.
depends. Is it an automated email or is it from my sales rep
Oh, yeah,
who
I'm talking
is
about
just being
automated
lazy and
emails.
sending out a bunch of stuff without really knowing what's happening? And so I feel like it just depends, right? And there's different standards. If it's coming from a person that I've had an interaction with and it's got bad data, then that feels icky. If
Yes.
it's mass email from Maxine Scott Marketing, or like this webinar, it was an email confirmation from Zoom, then I think I feel less offended when the personalization is off, because it's clearly a mass platform that's intended to be that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, and it's funny though, I have received, usually when I see it, it's from like some new BDR, right? Who's basically raided the database kind of thing, and didn't pay attention. Or like, even when I started at Uberflip and I looked through Salesforce, I was in there 3 or 4 times. Every job I had was actually in there, because I'd met the people at Uberflip back in 2016 at Marketo Summit, the big Vegas one, and the infamous Vegas one. And I was like, wow, this is what actually really showed me the platform. I was so impressed with it. I thought we need to be using this at SAP. And unfortunately it didn't work out, but I'm working at I'm working at Uberflip now. So it's
Yeah, that's so cool.
right. But
Um,
anyway, let's continuing down this thing here, right?
yeah,
Essentially, adoption. You need to have, in the second line, departmental adoption and enablement of language processes and platforms. Everyone is buying in to using the same technology. You don't have one department saying, I'm going to go use MailChimp because I don't want to wait for the self-service, or I don't want to wait for shared services who own Marketo to build me an email or build me a campaign. So I'm going to go run off on my own and do something. And, I'm not going to worry about GDPR processes. I'm not going to worry about sending customers or prospects multiple emails in the same day, right? I think we know, we could speak to people who've received tens of emails in the same day from the same vendor, right?
yeah, 100%.
So govern it. And then next we go into, so once you get adoption, once you get people adopting the language, adopting the processes in these platforms you're using, then you want to look at governance. You want to make sure that ongoing learning, like you are sustaining this adoption, right? And that's governance, data quality and consistency. So it's working because you're actually able to run reports and show that the data is accurate, So people are,
Okay, so I'm going to take it one more step, Jeff. It's not just that data dictionary in the common vernacular, it's an identified source of truth.
yes. And actually that source of truth is part of, I think, the business language. And I'm glad you brought it up because it's such a hot issue, right? Like as you know, I'm a big fan of Syncery, right? And I like the model in which, they have this unified piece of data. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of platforms but as you start to talk to your different business units and different stakeholders, everybody likes the concept of a single source of truth. But it's not so much that it's dead. It was actually this sort of ideal state that nobody ever actually needed. What they needed was, I want the information in where I am, and I want it to be synced across all the other platforms, right? I
No,
want everybody.
you know what, as you just said it, I have a different take on what single source of truth means. To me, single source of truth doesn't mean Snowflake is an aggregate of everything. And so we say Snowflake is the single source of truth. To me, in your data dictionary, that you are having one single source of truth for each data point.
Yes.
So number of sales outreaches, that would live in SalesLoft. The opportunity close rates, that would live in Salesforce. That's the single source of truth for that. The have they paid or not, their status on payment would be single source of truth, would be Oracle. So to me, I mean, with the data dictionary for each data point, we have the agreement on what we call it and the agreement on what system has it and where it lives. So that when there is a discrepancy, because oh my God, like the salespeople and the marketing people, they're like, you only sent me 6 leads. And I'm like, I sent you 400 leads. What are you talking about? Like Marketo says 400, you're saying you got 6. And then you go through and they're like, oh, well, I only accepted 6 of them because they were for my target accounts. Okay, well, I sent you 400. Like, you can't say we didn't send you 400. You could say we didn't send you good ones, but like, let's agree on the source of truth for that count.
Well, and that's exactly part of the data dictionary, or the business vernacular.
Yeah.
Right, is agreeing on these processes, right? Agreeing on what is that threshold you could push. If you have a one-to-one sync between Marketo and Salesforce, which I think is a good idea, because it does allow people to look, it allows account reps to look at accounts that may not have hit your measurable thresholds, right? But they may say, you know what, actually, I read about this company and they just got some financing and it hasn't shown up in our intent data from our intent data vendor yet. So I'm going to reach out to that account because I know about it, right?
Yeah.
And so you want to move that account that is really just not a great fit, but move it into a good fit because of what you've just read. So you need that data sitting in Salesforce, but you push them all over, and then you just identify the accounts that are worth going after. Because the way I think you need to look at accounts, my view is, are they a business win and a technical win? Which essentially means, can they afford you? And do they need you? Right? Because you can see that they may need you, but they can't afford you. Then, you put them into an email nurture and talk to them again in a year, right?
Okay, that might be an Uberflip problem, but I have a free tier, so it's not a me problem, Jeff. But
No,
I get it for the audience out there. Most of us have restrictions on who we can help.
so free, and I think that's what's so great about product-led growth. Like, if you have a free tier and you want to drive people to a free tier so they can see the value of the product, and eventually it is on their roadmap to add to their stack when they can afford it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I want to also make sure that the brilliant 27-year-old who is working at a startup that doesn't have budget, who is amazing and is going to go get picked up and like work alongside you in a couple of years, also wants to use our product. So I want to make it easy for them to get their head around it and use it if they want it now, and then in the future be able to upsell. But neither here nor there. Yes, I agree with you. Like, can they afford it? Like, do they do they fit the targeting of a potential prospect is super important.
Yeah. So getting kind of continuing on with this, the optimization part. So once you've got people adopting it, using the same language, referencing the same data model, right? Every data point, everybody understands what each data point means, and everybody has access to that up-to-date data. Everyone is using everything properly. Then it's not just set it and forget it. You go back and you optimize. And ops people like to do this all the time. Like we don't set up a huge lead management workflow and think, great, it's done, I'm never going to touch this again for years. You're always thinking, how can I improve this? When executable campaigns came out, I started thinking about, oh, I could do this, right? It solves so many problems around performance in Marketo and timing issues. You literally moved your lead management flow from things moving in parallel to things moving in serial, and you could control and put it and skip the wait steps because now you've built it into the framework, right? So you
Okay,
always need to
how do
be
you
optimizing.
prioritize optimizations against other projects that you have going on? How do you find time for that, especially in like a 30, 60, 90 where you're also learning?
So within I'm just gonna go back here. Let's go back to you're going to see my messy slides here. All right. But so 30 days, you want to figure out your strategy and socialize your strategy. By 60 days, this is my view, right? And I'm not getting granular. You need to have executed the plan that your implementation plan that comes out of your strategy. And you may have multiple plans based on different tools that you have. At 90 days, at that 3-month point, your data has to be trustworthy, right? It has to be reliable. And at that point, you start building on scalability, right? So
yeah, I would argue you need to identify whether it's trustworthy or not. I think it's totally fine to have a map that says these are the 12 points of data we want. These 5 are verified and stable. These are 8 that we're working on.
right. And so you have to absolutely, and that's what I mean. It's trustworthy because you've validated it.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, that all falls out of your strategy, which your strategy includes building a common vernacular kind of thing, right?
Verbiage, vernacular, words, data dictionary. I'm here for all of it. Yeah.
Going backwards here. Skip the marketing structure. This was the marketing structure for operations. This is about change management. We'll skip that. That's another call. But basically, it's these things right here of how you roll out across your 90 days and your operations, and then your whole adoption governance optimization. And these are these 3 slides. These are what kind of guide me through my thinking. And these are ideal states. You're never going to get there, right? Because it becomes your reference point. You work towards it. This part here can be really tough. Like you often see new leadership come in and they want to change systems, right? Whether it be new CROs, new CMOs, new CEOs, and it's just the way of life. So you have to, and especially in enterprise, you could be working on something for 6 months only to find out that actually we have our department now reports to somebody else and that's not a priority for them. So you can keep on working on it, but it's a P3, right?
Yeah.
This is now priority 1, and we have a whole new agenda. We have a whole new issue. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I definitely find it's critical to have a published backlog of those work items and my prioritization so that when those systems happen, it's not oh, now I'm not going to finish the thing I was working on and what a waste of time. It's these were my defined priorities. The thing you've asked me to do you want it to be number 1? Do you want it to be number 2 or number 3? That means we're going to have to communicate to the stakeholders of 2 and 3 that these deadlines will be moved.
Yes.
So which one would you like me to reprioritize to accomplish this? And then it's not a whiny bitchy who moved my cheese conversation. It's a business conversation about priorities.
And that's a really valuable point there, is involving the other stakeholders. So often, you'll be faced with a stakeholder that says, you need to, I need this done right away. And you can say, well, I've actually got this other stakeholder who has given priority as well, who wants this done today. Let's get them on a call very quickly, or a quick huddle in Slack, and see if I can push their deadline back and get onto yours. Right.
Yeah.
Especially if they're in senior leadership. Now you have to make a determination. It's like if the CEO has reached out to you directly, and or as opposed to going through your manager, right? The CMO or the VP marketing or CRO and VP sales, if because they need something done, well, you just do it, kind of thing, right? You have to use some common sense, right? Do go tell your manager that this request has been made, and that you're supporting senior leadership, right?
Yeah. I mean, and you know what? As a CEO, there's stuff I want that's ridiculous. And it's pretty infrequent that I'm gonna require some to reprioritize things. But every now and then I'll feel strongly about it. And it's probably for a reason, like an investor, that is less of a good reason than a customer. But on occasion, those things have to happen that way. So knowing that this is a ridiculous request from the CEO and it's a pet peeve of his and it's irrational, but prioritize it, that's a perfectly good reason for me. Like, it's totally fine. Like, this is my boss. It's an irrational fear they have. It was something that happened at a company and they got fired for it 10 years ago. So like, just make sure that the brand colors are posted on everybody's cubicle or whatever it is, right? Like, sometimes the priorities need to be the thing that makes the person whose support you need sleep at night better.
Absolutely. If you take that approach, that you are there, everyone is your customer, all your coworkers are your customers, in your business, you're there to serve. If everybody thinks I'm here to serve, right, that everybody starts to trust you. They start to trust your judgment, right? They know they can count on you. They know you've got their back, right?
Yeah.
And that's the kind of atmosphere you want to work in. You want to have an atmosphere where people trust each other. People know that you're respecting the individual, they're respecting their space, and etc. But the overall mission we're all making is for the business to succeed, right? Because that
Yeah.
pays off for us, right?
Yeah. I feel like if you're a high ego person who's using high ego to probably mask low self-confidence, you're going to be someone who struggles with that. And it's not something either you or I struggle with. It's certainly, I clearly have the ego and the self-confidence. But I always found that if I could come into a place and say, what do you need to get your job done? It's fine. It's almost like there's like the things that are indicative of that high ego, low self-confidence are going to be, there's only one right way to do something in Marketo.
Yeah,
The person who came before me was bad. Like, I think those are things where you can see that it's a lack of knowledge and a high ego that can be really, really dangerous in those roles.
so I'm not a fan of that when you talk about and I've heard this, like when you adopt a new Marketo instance and you go, oh, this is all crap. If you actually dig a little deeper, you start to see that the previous MOPS person was trying to do something really amazing. And that's what I've seen, right? And I've seen a series, and it's not just where I am now, it's everywhere I've been, right? And now I'm fortunate in that in a couple of I've been able to spin up 3 new Marketo instances in my career so far, right? And I think that I've been very fortunate to go from this fresh install and build out what the whole lead management flow is, right? And
Yeah.
each time I've done it, it's gotten better, right? And with the executable workflows, I really have been so impressed. But one thing what I've discovered is that I see attempts of really brilliant projects, but I don't see completed projects. And often that's because people move, right? There's this migration of people moving to new opportunities because they get either more money or a company has a riff or something like that. So projects never get completed. So I think that is the mindset to take, is that what were they actually trying to do? What was their intent? What I see is an unfinished project, but I know
Yeah.
what they're trying to do. And
Although I'm going to bash a previous Marketo admin right now. The worst thing I've ever seen in their flow when an opportunity was marked as closed lost,
they
they
delete
added
it.
them to the blacklist.
Oh,
Any
well,
closed lost opportunity, every contact associated it
oh,
was blacklisted.
so I would almost argue that that doesn't seem like the right process. I would marketing suspend them for 90 days before you try to send them any communication or put them into, because your close loss, especially if it was a late stage close lost. Late stage close loss are really important because you lost on a contract issue. So if you come back to them 3 to 6 months later, maybe they're not happy with that vendor, their
Yeah,
selection.
or it could have been budget. They couldn't get budget approval, so they made a no decision. Like it
Yeah.
was every band. It wasn't like one band where they like were determined to be a competitor. So it could have been an accident. They could have been like, if it was closed loss because they were a competitor and accidentally included all. But I was like, God bless, I have never seen a database with this many people blacklisted. What on earth is going on? It was that.
Oh,
that
yeah.
that one was pretty good. But at the same time, if you've been there for a long time after that mistake happened and you never noticed that your blacklist was that massive, I would also argue you're not doing your job very well.
Yeah, I would agree with that because you need to have smart lists built. There is a smart list already pre-built for blacklisting, but you need to have a series. Like I have a folder just called random smart list requests, right? But then I also have a set, and these are things I check on a weekly basis. I'm looking as part of my, like I have a weekly, monthly, and I have my Stack Moxie file folder structure built out that way too. Tests that run daily, tests that run weekly and monthly and quarterly, right? And so I have
I
and
was
I
never as good as you, Jeff. I always had to have that be something that I gave to stakeholders to force me to do that super regular, diligent communication. And so I had a newsletter that would go out that was like boring stuff no one cared about, but like, hey, proof I looked at it. If these numbers bother you, they didn't bother me or I wouldn't have sent them to you. But like, if these numbers bother you that we have such a low blacklist or that we're not, and I know it's not called blacklist anymore. What is it called? That was awful. I know that there's new language for that. Block list, the block list.
block list.
Sorry.
Right?
Um, yeah, but it was just validation that I'm checking all of these things. Other people can see them. And like, if they raise an eyebrow about a number, then let's talk about it and set what the thresholds should be. But like people like you who can actually do that regularly and consistently, I'm so impressed by. Like I have to have tooling to do it for me.
But I'm not a CEO and you are. We each have our strengths. We exist somewhere on a spectrum, right? And not a singular line, but like this three-dimensional model of brightness and intensity and preferences, and everyone's very different. And, perhaps more CEOs are existing over in this space and have some pieces over here, and others are over here, right? And they're marketing ops people who are amazing people managers, but are really good, but are good at pulling in the right ops people, right? They
Yeah.
know at a high level, they know what systems are needed, but they don't get into the granular details. They hire people who can do that kind of thing, right? Had this thought I wanted to share before we finished off when we were
Okay.
talking about good leaders and how to work with others and all that. And at it was a Marketo summit, and I went down with two teams I was with where I was working, and we had a meeting with Steve Lucas, who was CEO of Marketo at the time. And the first thing
And
he
I
said,
hate to objectify someone, but he was so handsome.
you know what? He's a good-looking guy. He's got he's got a series of posts out. He's very fitness savvy, right? He's very he's public about that and why. But he's taken a lot of risks, I think, in his life. He talks about that in one of his podcast sort of videos on LinkedIn that he's got with Allison Biggin, right? And who is she's a VP. I can't remember her title, but anyway, I worked with her too at SAP. Never worked with Steve, but met Steve. And the thing is when we sat down for this meeting, he said, "How can I help you?" And his hands were open. "How can I help you?" Right? And it was for me. It was like because that was customer first. So that was a really important lesson for me. Right? I didn't think. It's really what I would expect from when you're spending the kind of money we're spending. But also there's that relationship that I'm in this room and these people that I'm with also used to report up to Steve, right? So there is a bit of a personal connection there, but that how can I help you? And I thought that is how conversations need to start. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I think that's the essence of an ops function. Like, and I don't demean the profession whatsoever, but having it be something that supports other business functions makes them more scalable, makes them better. Like, I think it's and I think when you can enter a new role, especially in those 30, 60, 90s, when you're having your first meetings with the stakeholders or the partners you have to work with, like, how can we do better than what was done in the past? What's something I can fix? What's one of your core objectives to get done this year that I can support you on? And I think and I love like even being intentional about your hand gestures, and being open and listening to people and figuring out how you can support them. And you're not committing to helping them with those things, writing it down and listening and being able to hearken back to it. I remember that speed to lead being under 2 minutes was on your important list. I haven't forgotten about it. We track it and we've been making progress on it. I'm not going to commit to get there from 2 days.
But you have a defined goal. And you know what? The executables, like I knew when I was rolling out executables, I had a target in mind as well. Right. And of like, I think it was taking us at one point, it was taking us half a day or something like this. I'm like, you know what? I need to get this down to 20 minutes. And you are limited by that Marketo Salesforce sync. That is right. So you do need to allow for that. But that is really my only roadblock from instant follow-up from a salesperson to a form fill is that Marketo Salesforce sync. Right. And so, but
I would argue 50% of sales leaders don't know what the sync time is set to. They're like, we're going to follow up in 5 minutes, but your sync time is 8 minutes. You never had a shot.
Well, one of the things I do instead, one of the first things I do is I have my follow-up email with a Calendly link to someone who's filled out a form saying, while you're waiting for your demo request, go book a meeting right now with if it's a known account, then we have an account owner. If it's not a known account, then it goes to a BDR.
I think Chili Piper did a really good job in enabling that stuff. And I love the research they just did on it as well. It was really cool.
I built it in Marketo.
Oh, nice.
Right. So sorry, I know that sounds so arrogant. I built the segmentation in Marketo so it automatically populates with the appropriate account owner's calendar.
Oh, so the segmentation is defining the account owner.
Yeah. Right.
All right. Okay, I'm here for it.
So the thing is here's the great thing about executable campaigns is I need to know who the account owner would be first. So that's one of these, I need to get this stuff over to Salesforce, get the account owner identified. And as soon as that value is filled, I'm pushing out that email to the person who just filled out the demo request form. So they're getting an email potentially within 10 minutes, potentially 20 minutes. And just
I
depends.
love not having to put the stupid arbitrary wait steps in with executables. Like that's the best part to me,
Yeah.
right? It's really cool. All right. Well, we are way over time, Jeff. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of this. I'm going to grab your slides. I'll also do our leave behind. We're going to cut this into bits because it was really long. And so we're going to take the different segments and put them into bits and share them with the audience. We'll share the whole thing with anyone who wants it as well.
Yeah, and the what is it? What are we looking at here? About 150 people join this, our attendees.
I mean,
So
at least.
well, I think it was higher, but it's down. It's kind of dropped off. I think because I went on for a long time. So,
I can't
but
believe anyone stayed with us.
I appreciate that we still got so many people hanging on here, and thank you. And anybody, if they want to connect on LinkedIn, they're welcome to find me.
Yeah, we're both here for help, freely given. Just please ask.
Yeah. All right.
Thanks.
Great. Talk to you again soon.
And I'll see you all at Mopsapalooza. And you'll see Jeff remotely. So sign up for
Yes.
Mopsapalooza right now.
Awesome.
Bye.